My grandfather used to say, the biggest problem in the world is related to one thing and one thing only, and that is communication. And many of us are taught how to speak. Many of us are taught how to do that part of communication, but very, very few people are taught any skills regarding listening. And what I have found over the years is that if you become a better listener, and it doesn't take a lot, it's just a few tools to become a better listener. If you can become a better listener, your communication all of a sudden increases and gets better. And this is communication not just at work, but at home and at play, not just with the people that you deal with on a daily basis, but everybody. I mean, everybody. Once you become a better listener, you become a better communicator, and better communicators get along with people a lot better. So I'm here today to help Hand to Hold become better listeners, and thus better communicators. The good people at Hand to Hold have a special listening challenge, and the challenge is emotion. Many people don't know how to handle emotion regarding listening. What are some of the rules regarding emotion? Because if you're on the phone talking with somebody who has just discovered that their child is born in a NICU unit, in a neonatal intensive care unit, immediately you've got emotion to deal with. So how do you connect with that person and listen to that person to where they will feel like you are a trusted advisor and you've created a safe place where they can share their story? One of the best ways that you can do that, and one of your biggest challenges and biggest goals, is to set that safe place. Set up a place where that person can feel like they can pour out their heart without being judged and without being criticized for anything that they say. And one of the best ways that you can do that is by telling your story. Most of the volunteers, the wonderful people with Hand to Hold, have been through it themselves. But how do you tell your story without it being about you? And the whole conversation you want to be about them, the person on the other end of that line. So you tell your story with empathy, and the only way that you can tell your story with empathy toward the other person on the other end of the line, is to ask some questions first. They call in and they've got this problem. Tell me more about what you're thinking right now. And as they tell you about this particular condition or what the doctor told them, at that point you might be able to tell them, I know how you feel because I went through the same thing and this is what I found. That way you're not telling your entire story, which could be too broad for them to understand. If you start telling your story and start talking about things that don't relate to them, you're going to lose them. And they're going to feel like this isn't a safe place to talk. But if you ask them that very brief question, tell me what's going on right now, what are your challenges right now, and they tell you about a specific thing, if you've been there, they will feel more comfortable with you. And then when you finish that point, you could ask, tell me more. Tell me more. It's about them, but until you tell them your story, they really won't know who's on the other end of the line. Because if you can imagine, if you've ever called anybody and spoken to somebody at a bank or wherever, one of the first things that's going through your mind might be, you don't know what I'm going through. You want to create that safe place and that empathy. And you do that by asking questions, but not a lot of questions, just a few things. And it's the simple ones that'll get the conversation going. One of the things that we talk about and that you will learn is how to handle the emotion. What are some of the rules about what if they cry? Okay, somebody's crying either face to face or on the other end of the line. When or do you interrupt? How will you know when they're done? How will you know what to say and how to say it? Being a very good listener is about knowing when to react to that. Most people are afraid of silence in a conversation, but volumes have been spoken in silence. If I'm speaking with you and you tell me your story and you start to get emotional and I just let you have that emotion and have that silence, or you say something that's really profound, you might not be crying, but you say something that's profound. And if we're live, I can see that you've got this on your face, but over the phone I can feel that you're thinking about something. Don't say anything. Let the silence happen. Length of silence can be uncomfortable at first, but they will respect you more if you're listening to that silence and then they say something else. If it gets to be what you consider to be too long, you can say, tell me more. Or what do you think? But don't be afraid of silence, because there is such power in silence. Here in the U.S., we are raised in a society that teaches us that if you talk about yourself, you're bragging, and that's not a good thing. At Hand to Hold, if you want to get empathy and feel close with that person who's on the other end of the phone, or that you're talking with face to face who's going through this challenge, part of it needs to be telling your own story. So forget what you've learned. You need to tell part of your story. So it's not bragging. It's creating that empathy. It's very, very important. And it can be powerful. It can be powerful. What you want to say and how you want to say it will be more of a reflection on what that person is going through at the time. People like to have conversation with people who they are most like. So, mirroring is an important thing. If they're talking in a big voice and they're talking about it, you might want to try to do that too. But more than likely, if they're real soft, be soft with them. Because if they're soft, and you come across like this, they're going to feel uncomfortable. So mirroring their voice, their volume, their tone, that might help create that empathy. But as you tell your story, try to mirror them in all of those physical attributes. Listening is a basic human need, and we're not taught that. But to be heard, but really to be listened to, is something that we all need. To be the person who is the listener and can fulfill that need, you become a very important person in that person's life. Whether it's a stranger that you've just met because of your role at Hand to Hold, or if it's somebody that you've known for many, many years. These tools that we teach, try them at home. Try them with your parents. Try them with people that you've known for years. Change the way you've been listening just a little bit, and you'll get the ultimate compliment of, my God, you're a good listener. Think to yourself right now, how many times have you heard that? My guess is not too often. But when you start hearing that, not only will you feel good, but they will feel like they want to have more conversations with you. And that's the whole point to the Hand to Hold volunteer. You want that person who you're talking with to feel comfortable enough with you and want to come back to have more conversations. We as a culture don't listen because whatever communication skills we are taught, and we're not really taught communication skills, we're taught from how we see communication going, and we view it as a ping pong match. My turn, your turn, my turn, your turn, bam, 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 bam. So as somebody else is talking, most people think, well, what am I going to say? What am I going to say next? What am I going to say next? So while that is going through their head, they're not listening to what they're talking about, what the other person is really saying. That's why we're not good listeners. We're just never taught how to listen. We're taught, again, how to talk, but we're not taught how to listen. It's not a ping pong match. It's not a ping pong match. One of the analogies that I use toward listening is any conversation that I enter into, in my mind, before I enter into that conversation, I'm thinking, what treasure does that person have in their mind and their heart right now that I can find? Now, to find a treasure, you have to be patient, and you have to explore it a little bit. So I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to listen. One of the tools that I use in my listening that will help me get that treasure is, and this is one of my favorite tools, the next thing that I say has to include one word from the last sentence that they say. Okay, so what does that make you do? That forces you, number one, to wait till they're finished. And how do you know they're finished? Well, you have to have a long pause before you know that they're finished, right? And it forces you to keep listening to everything that they're saying because you don't know if it's the last thing that they're saying. It's a great tool to use, and at first it may seem awkward, but after you start using this, you're going to find yourself just listening a lot better, asking a lot more questions, and you can have a whole conversation and they don't know anything about you because you've just engaged them. People love to be listened to. And I've had many conversations where people will say, you know, I don't know anything about you. It's okay, but they want to be engaged. And with your role as a volunteer with Hand to Hold, that's what you want. Again, it's not about you. Although telling your story is a very important part about what you're doing, it's not about you, it's about them. You want them to feel comfortable enough to come back and to get the wonderful advice that Hand to Hold gives.